Yeah, very good morning. Welcome to Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. Just to also let you know, we are expecting to hear from the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, on the situation in the Middle East, in the Commons, in the next couple of minutes. And we'll bring you that live, of course, here on Sky News when it happens. But let's focus on those GDP figures this morning, because when Labour took power last July, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor made it clear it was their number one priority to grow the economy. Well, 6 months later, and those latest GDP figures show what is actually happening, and it's only increased by the smallest measurable amount. In fact, the overall economy hasn't grown at all since the start of this new Labour government. This morning's figures reveal that growth was only 0.1% in November. That's lower than economists had expected. But though it isn't a huge number, it is at least an increase after a contraction of 0.1% in the previous month. There was also a contraction in September, which means in the 3 months to November, the economy has essentially flatlined. Well, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has been giving her reaction this morning.
The most important thing to grow the economy is returning stability to the economy. And when I became Chancellor, there was a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. We couldn't carry on like that, because that is the road to ruin. We saw that under the last Conservative government. When they play fast and loose with the public finances, it is ordinary working people that pay the price. So I've drawn a line under that instability and ensured that the sums now add up.
Well, let's go live now to our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso, who joins us. Paul, I mean, frankly, this is pretty dismal, isn't it? I mean, 0.1% growth. Effectively, couldn't be any lower when it comes to growth.
No, it's the smallest amount the Office for National Statistics considers worth recording. But as you said, it is a return to some growth in contrast to the previous 2 months. It's less than the consensus of economists' expectations. Unlike yesterday, when we saw inflation come down and be below expectations, good news when it comes to inflation. This was slightly worse than expected, but hasn't come with quite the same penalty for the Chancellor as there was upside yesterday. We saw markets quite buoyed by that good news on inflation. Today, markets are sanguine about this. What it confirms to us is that the market we've returned. This confirms a trend, really. The UK economy is now bumping along a fraction of a percentage point or two either side of zero. And that is precisely the opposite of what was promised by Labour when they came into power, with growth as a priority. The awkward fact for them in this latest set of data is we look at the first half of 2024, there was over 1% of growth if you look at the half year as a whole. Now, in part, that was because that was a response measured against the last half of 2023, when the economy was technically in recession. So there was a bounce back. But since July, the economy in these figures, which are for November, it's the same size as it was in July when Rachel Reeves became Chancellor. And that is an awkward fact at the very mildest. A combination, perhaps, of excessive doom and gloom in the initial period after they won, talking down the state of the economy, perhaps to try and emphasise the contrast when they came to power. And then we've had the budget, which, while its measures are not yet fully have not yet been applied, that will start in April, particularly the tax changes that businesses are so concerned about. It is it's been considered both anti-growth, in the words of some businesses I speak to, and indeed inflationary by the judgment of the Bank of England. So this is a difficult and not something Rachel Reeves can blame some of the movements in the markets on international conditions, but she's responsible for the budget. Somehow it's going to have to deliver growth while also shoring up the public finances, which she referred to there. I spoke to one hospitality businessman this week. Andy Jones runs a couple of community restaurants in London and a catering business, and we can hear from him now. He's pretty apocalyptic about the state of the market for hospitality particularly.
As a business, with what's going to happen this year, especially in hospitality, the bloodbath which is going to ensue when that budget kicks in, business rates hiking back up. We are walking a tightrope on a balance sheet all year round. And what's coming to this industry with the price hikes of food, with the price hikes of alcohol, with people not spending as much money when they go out, all your favourite places are going to close down.
And Paul, looking forward, the concern is that where is this growth going to come from? Not least of all because we could well see inflation edge up later on this year.
Yes, industries like Andy Jones's business like his are expecting to have to increase prices, or the forecasts are that inflation will increase, in part as a consequence of measures in the budget, but also energy price fluctuation. So before it stabilises around 2%, which is the forecast for about a year hence, it will go up further. And here's the challenge: the real fundamental drivers of growth, changing the supply side of the British economy, is a long-term project. It's going to need fundamental reforms and investments, the kind of things that Labour, to be fair, were elected on a promise to deliver. Planning reform. We heard the Prime Minister this week talking about adopting AI, building on the high growth areas where we do have an advantage because we have bright people in the life sciences and the like. How do those turn those industries into ones that deliver growth for the long term? So that's a long-term project, but politics is short-term. You know, changing the state of productivity in the British economy is a marathon. Delivering political success is a sprint. Politics demands it has to be both, and the Chancellor has somehow got to demonstrate she can deliver short-term gains to retain confidence while building this long-term project. Should be said, she's going to be working quite hard to get that message across. Today, she's got regulators coming in to see her, Ofgem, that regulate many of the sectors we all engage with. She's been asking them how they can encourage growth amongst the companies that they broadly oversee. We've had some announcements of inward investment today. Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, talking about further investment from a third party in the Sunderland Nissan manufacturing plant. Evidence, they would say, of successful overseas companies expanding their investment in the UK, not cutting it. And Rachel Reeves will be in Davos at the World Economic Forum next week, when she'll be on the equivalent of speed dating with international investors. Hundreds of very big corporations and investment groups will be there. She'll be encouraging them to see Britain as a place to invest, and their verdict will be critical.
OK. Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. Paul Kelso there, our economics and business correspondent. Well, what does this really mean when it comes to the real world, if you like? Can the leisure sector in particular help boost growth in the next 12 months? Or will it be dragged down by those tax increases and staffing costs? Well, delighted to say we can speak to the Chief Executive of Butland. That's John Hendry Pickup. John, very good morning to you in a very colourful Butland there this morning. John, just give us a sense of where your business is at, given this overall macroeconomic picture, which is not great. Is that bleeding through to the real world in terms of how Butland's is performing?
Well, January is a really important month for us in terms of holiday sales for the year. This is when people are looking forward to booking time with their family or time with their friends. And so far, we've seen a very strong start to the month. And so Monday was our biggest ever sales day. Tuesday surpassed that and was our biggest ever sales day. So we're encouraged so far. But what's really clear is that people are seeking value for money. And I think some of that is what you've just had a conversation with Paul about, to do with the economy. The economy remains fragile. And whilst the economy remains fragile and the message that the government gives across is also gloomy, then we end up in a position where people are very careful with how they spend their money. So whilst we're really pleased with how things have started, we're having to work very hard to make sure we give that value for money to our guests.
And you know, obviously, from April, tax is going to increase, that national insurance hike, and the minimum wage or the national living wage is going to increase. What pressure is that going to add?
It won't surprise you to know that it's many millions of pounds for our business per year. And we weren't expecting the second part of that. Of course, we've been used to way above inflation increases in national living wage for a number of years, and we've factored that into how we work within our business. It's not easy to do, but we have done. And so of course, naturally, what that does do is it puts pressure on our position as the largest employers in the areas in which we work with our resorts. And so clearly we have to focus heavily on productivity, how we improve our use of every hour that we have in our business with our guests. But no doubt that's added a great deal of pressure at a point when we weren't expecting it to our business.
And John, when we look at the current government, they spent a lot of time before the election talking about how they're pro-business. I interviewed a Michelin star restaurant owner yesterday who said he had felt let down by Labour only 6 months in. How do you feel about this government and whether you feel they've let you down as a business chief executive?
I think it's extraordinarily difficult to run a country from a position of government. I think their situation is hard. What I haven't seen yet is anything that would indicate for me this is how we're going to help you to grow. We're having to do a lot of that heavy lifting ourselves as it stands at the moment. I think it's a hard position. What I would like to see is that even though it's clear that the economy is fragile as it stands, we do also, I believe, have the highest net savings rate in the G7, and so therefore that indicates a lack of confidence. I'd like to see more messaging to say, you know, the UK is a good place to invest. We're spending a lot of money on our business. The building that I'm stood in now is a recent multi-million-pound investment in our business to make sure we get that right for our guests. And so more messages to indicate that and less gloom, I think, would definitely help us to be confident, to invest more, and to make sure that we're doing the right thing to look after our guests.
That's interesting, John. So you're essentially saying there that actually, if the government, others talked up the economy a bit more, given the savings rates, that actually we could find growth? Because that's the big question, isn't it, for all of us in this country, not just the government, is where does this growth come from, particularly when it's so low at the moment? We're effectively just threading water.
Private sector is going to be the growth engine of the economy, whether we like it or not, and encouraging people to make sure that they're investing by getting the message across that the UK is open for investment and we're going to make it simple for people, I think would be great. I suspect that the surprise at the last budget was because we'd heard that the number one lever that we will pull is growth, and then having something which was a substantial tax attached to private businesses probably caused a high degree of alarm at that stage. So more messages about what we could do to drive our businesses and how the government can support that, I think would be welcome from anybody who runs a company. And our opportunity to employ more people, you know, the hospitality sector is the third largest employer in the UK. We'd like to be able to do that so we can stimulate our growth on top of the capex that we're investing in buildings like the one that I'm in today.
And just very finally, John, you know, talking about Butland's very specifically, as you say, this is the big month for bookings. You know, how is it looking this year? Where are people thinking of going on holiday? Because you talk to the airlines and they say things are pretty robust, but do people also want to spend, you know, their spring and summer here in the UK? And are there regional differences about where people like to go, I suppose?
Sure. So on the first bit, I've never thought that UK holidays and overseas holidays were a zero-sum game. I think there's an opportunity for both, and we see that with our guests. They may have a week in Spain in the summer, and also then they'll spend time in February half-term or May half-term with us as well, and we're really happy with that. I think that people are seeing headlines that overseas is expensive. We saw that in one of the newspapers yesterday to say an average holiday costs more than £5,000 now. So we're trying to indicate value for money. We're trying to make sure we include loads of things in the holiday price. So if people are looking for that value, I think we're here to be able to deliver that. Okay. And we've seen since the global financial crisis in 2008, people prioritise holidays.
John, we're just going to stop you there because we're going to bring in the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who's in the Commons talking about the situation in Gaza and Israel with that deal. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.